Hello and welcome to a TechHub.Training video. In this solution video, we're going to be showing you the solution for the cash disbursement audit bot challenge, and I'm really excited about this one, so let's jump into it. So just to give you a quick background, in this challenge, you're working as a financial analyst at Eagle Tech Solutions, and your boss has asked you to create an AI solution or a solution with AI that helps you to flag cash disbursements that need to be reviewed. And so there's 4 different criteria for cash disbursements that need to be reviewed. Either it's a payment made to an unauthorized vendor, it's an unusual payment amount that deviates from historical transactions, the payment description doesn't align with what the vendor provides as their service, or it's an unexpected payment method, meaning that if the vendor usually gets payments through ACH or gets payments through checks or wires, as a preferred method, they get paid through a different method. And so we want to flag all of these different transactions so that we can review them and say, why did these transactions go out? And this will help out with our controls and our risk levels. So this challenge was specifically made to open-ended so that you could get really creative with how you made your solution. The only thing is just to leverage AI in using it. And so for me personally, I had a very long conversation with AI where it helped me to create my solution. So let me pull that up for you guys. I chose to go the route of a Python script because I enjoy Python and it works really well for this type of stuff. But there's many different ways that you could have done this challenge. And so there's not one right answer. This is just the answer that I came up with. So let me just walk you through my code here and show you what ChatGPT and I were able to come up with. So I guess before I do this, let me just show you the data that we're working with. I'll just pull it up real quick. So this is the cash disbursement file that you have. There's 100 rows of cash disbursements. And then you have the second tab here that has your authorized payees. And so you're able to check your cash disbursements and see if the payee ID is somebody that is supposed to get paid. And then, it has your amount, the currency type. So you see here you have one Canadian, or I guess some Canadian, and then other ones are US. And then a description for what the payment was for, and then the payment method. So, and these are all things that you can check against your authorized payees and kind of what goods they provide, what their preferred payment method is, where they live, so does it make sense that they're getting paid in Canadian dollars, that sort of thing. So, so I had a long conversation with ChatGPT and said, this is what I'm looking to do. Please help me to brainstorm and come up with a solution. And I did mention that I wanted it to use Python. So let me actually just pull up that conversation I had. And this isn't the original conversation because I just had it reformat it for me quickly so that it would be easier for me to follow. So I essentially just started with a prompt and said, I've been given this challenge below. And then I, copied the whole challenge. And then I said, acting as an expert accountant and data analyst, help me complete this challenge using Python and an open API key. I wanted to not only use AI to create the solution, but also to incorporate AI into my solution and have it look holistically at the transaction with AI to see if it made sense. So that's definitely not required for this challenge, but it's something that if you're able to do, it's very good practice, and it's something that could be very beneficial to learn. So anyway, so then I told it the data I would be using comes from 2 Excel file sheets, and then I gave it the column names so that it didn't have to guess on what those were going to be. And I gave it the specific sheet names too so it could reference that. So then it said, and then I also said, let me know if there's any more information you need to create this Python script, which was very helpful because then it started to ask me questions that I hadn't thought about. And so it was like, how do you define a payment amount as unusual? Should we use fuzzy matching for payment descriptions? How do you want to do that? And all these different questions. And so with that, I was able to, give it feedback, and it was like, okay, great. So one of the things I said, when it was asking about payments amount, I said, unusual payment amounts are any that are 3 times their historical average. I'm definitely not an expert in this type of thing, so that was my guess. But you could try to make it more reasonable and accurate to what industry standards are. So anyway, I was able to to give more specifications, and then it said, okay, let's do this. And so it built this out, and I tested it and ran it, and some things were working right, some things weren't working right. And so the rest of this conversation essentially is just a lot of trial and error where I, if I got an error message, I'd say, hey, I got this error message. Let me know what I need to do. And it would be like, oh, you need to check and make sure you have the right model of OpenAI for your API key. I was having a lot of issues with my API key. And so it was just a lot of back and forth and just troubleshooting. And so eventually, eventually I was able to get it working just the way I wanted it to. So here's the file that I have right here, and I won't run it for you guys because it actually takes a little bit of time to run it with the API key. If I didn't have that API key in there and I was just, using, like mathematical formulas and stuff like that, then it wouldn't take nearly as long, and so I'd run that for you. But just because it's using the API key and it's evaluating each different row of data, it takes quite a bit. So I'll just show you what I have here. So I started out with, importing OS, importing pandas, and OpenAI so that I could use that Open API key. And the Open API key, I did have to put in credit card information for that. I've checked, and for me currently, I'm well under $5. I think it, probably cost a couple cents to run it. And so it was definitely worth it for me because I got that learning experience, but definitely not required for this assignment to get an API key or anything like that. But if you do, just know you probably will have to put in some credit card information for that. So then I started out with the just input stuff, where you could input the file name of the Excel sheet. And so for that one, obviously I'll be typing in just this Excel file name here once it runs, and then it goes in and reads both of these sheets, turns them into data frames with pandas, and then it merges it on payee ID and does a left join, and it's matching on the vendor ID, so the payee ID, excuse me. And then the way that it flags the unauthorized vendors is it goes and it goes into that data frame, and anywhere where the payee name isn't populated from the disbursements, it labels that in the unauthorized vendor in an unauthorized vendor column, and so that's flagged. And then it goes through and it groups them by the payee ID and the amount and gets the mean of that or the average, and then that's put into its own variable as a historical average. And once it's done that, then it takes the payee ID and it does this map function for the historical average, and then it makes a historical average column right here. And then it does a lambda function, which I actually don't know very much about lambda functions, and so this is something that I can go and verify with AI and say, hey, I'm not very familiar with lambda. Is this working correctly? To kind of see, but with that, you can tell here just from looking at it that it's taking the row amount and then timesing that by 3, and then seeing if that's higher than the historical average or not. And if it is, then it's flagging it there for an unusual amount. If you got a payment method mismatch, that's just checking to see if the payment method matches with what is preferred by that vendor. And if not, then it's getting flagged as a payment method mismatch. Okay, and then here's kind of the fun stuff that I added in with that Open API key. And what I'm doing here is I got this function that I'm defining where it's taking that row. Let's see, and then I have a prompt built here, and this is, let's see, is this the, okay, this is the user prompt, but this is kind of giving an instruction saying to the API, saying your financial advisor or auditor, sorry, evaluate the following transaction, and it has them look at all this information that's extracted for that row, and it says determine if the transaction is consistent with what we would expect from that vendor based on this information that's given here. So that vendor's name, what goods or service they provide, the description of that transaction, the amount, and the payment method. And then it does a description check, and then it does a holistic evaluation of the entire transaction as a whole. And it runs through and does that. Excuse me. And if it doesn't work, then you get this error during Open API calls, which I was dealing with that a lot earlier, but I was able to get that sorted out. So that was one of the main challenges, was just getting this API call set up correctly. And then once it creates that AI evaluation, then it just merges it into the flagged transactions. And then here we got a print statement for all of those. And then it outputs it here. And then I specify what I want the output Excel file name to be. And so you can see here I had different tests. I had 5 different tests going. And so the 5th one is where it was working. And so let me just show you guys real quick test 5. And so you can see which transactions were flagged. So keep in mind that we had 100 different transactions in there. And so it actually flagged 49 of those 100, which is quite a bit. And so that probably means that I need to go and adjust that prompt so that it's not flagging all of these, because there's maybe some in here where it shouldn't be flagged, or maybe it's just because I generated this data, and so when it generated it, it generated some kind of unrealistic descriptions, and so when it's going through and looking at them on a per row basis, then it's saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. So if this was working with actual financial data, where it should make more sense than just generated data that I've created, then you would probably get a lot less rows here. But anyway, so my solution is come up with 48 transactions. And here you can see you got all the information that was merged together. And then we have this unauthorized vendor check, historical average check, the unusual amount, and the payment method mismatch. You got this AI evaluation, and this is the text that was returned from the AI for each of these different transactions. And then you have your flags here, and this is concatenated with all of the different flags that were raised for that specific transaction. So you can see here most of these are just AI evaluation as suspicious, but there are some, like this one's a payment method mismatch. This one had a couple where it was an unauthorized vendor and the AI evaluated as suspicious. But you can see the majority of them are AI evaluations. So if we had this more fine-tuned, or if the transaction data that we were using was perhaps a little bit more realistic, I'm sure that we would have much less. But this is kind of just a cool way to learn how you can leverage AI to create a solution to something. Again, you don't have to use Python. You could have, done it in Excel, or you can even brainstorm with AI and say, hey, what would be the most efficient way to do this? But this is a really fun challenge, and I hope you enjoy it as you go through it. Thanks.